Visuals are being pumped into our drawing rooms of death and destruction in Gaza. The Israelis have the Hamas hold out in their tunnels as they close in on their bases in the heart of Gaza City. It will only be a matter of time, matter of days, before the Israelis take over the Hamas operation and command nerve centers. Its military operations are undoubtedly helping it win the war against Hamas, but the Palestinians seem to have run a very successful propaganda campaign against the Israelis. Every civilian death is portrayed as a genocidal hate crime by Israel. And Israel is under pressure from quite a few quarters to order a ceasefire. All of this despite video evidence that shows that the Hamas cleverly operates behind human shields and deliberately uses hospitals, schools and other civilian institutions, installations as bases to hit back at Israel. And I've shown you that footage in the past. Now let's speak to former Israeli External Affairs Minister Shlomo Ben-Ami to get a sense of how Israel is planning to negotiate the tricky road ahead. We also have with us noted strategic affairs expert Brahma Cheleni with us to explore whether Israel could have done things a bit differently. But let me first ask Mr. Ami a very straightforward question. Mr. Ami, there is a problem, and the problem is that of perception. We were expecting this perception to change about Israel. But I want to ask you, sir, do you think Israel is being singled out? And who is behind the propaganda to single it out, and why aren't you being able to combat it?
Well, what is coming out of the Arab nations is fully understandable. The Arab public opinion doesn't like the images, nor do Israelis like it particularly. For that matter, but the reaction of let us call it the progressive left in the West is the reflection of a disease that is incurable, probably. I mean, these people lay on Israel's shoulders the blame for centuries of Western colonialism in India, among other places, in Asia, in Africa, all over the world. And Israel is today to be blamed for American imperialism, for the wars in Vietnam, for all the sins that the West presumably committed against the third world, as it were. So I think that these people have a binary attitude to complex issues. So before they pronounce their criticism at Israel, they need to think slightly in a more complex sort of attitude, because this is not a simple conflict between black and white. I know about Israeli scenes of occupation of the Palestinians in West Bank. I have fought against it when I was in government. I led negotiations with Arafat at the beginning of the millennium, and we offered the Palestinians a full-fledged Palestinian state. We offered the partition of Jerusalem. We offered sovereignty on Islamic holy places, and they turned it down. This is the context. And these people that today presume to be the left, the enlightened left, either they are ignorant of the broader context, or they are simply anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitic. Well, let me bring in Mr. Cheleni. Mr. Cheleni, we have seen today that wars are fought on different planes. Yes, they're fought on the ground, they're sometimes fought in the air, in the sea, but they're also fought on the airwaves and in, the internet highway, etc., etc. Auxiliaries can create dissonance and break the consensus in societies about support for a war. Now, all of this surround sound will obviously be projected back into Israeli drawing rooms, and they could lead to obviously a breakdown of that consensus. Right now, there is overwhelming support for prosecuting this war against Hamas in Israel. Tomorrow, with these images, some of them seem to be contrived, faked, etc. I can't say. But a large amount of disinformation is there. Isn't this a problem today, Mr. Chileni?
Well, Rahul, you're right. In any conflict, misinformation and disinformation tend to play a role, and correcting the narrative, setting the facts right, becomes a challenge for any government. But the fact is that what's happening in Gaza, the images of death and destruction, are influencing international public opinion. For example, satellite imagery shows that more than 1/3 of the buildings in northern Gaza have already been destroyed. And the urban combat in Gaza City is just beginning. There are two examples that we have to keep in mind. One is Fallujah, other is Mariupol. When the second battle of Fallujah was fought between US-led coalition forces and insurgents, the city was completely destroyed. And the same thing happened more recently when the Russians took the Ukrainian city of Mariupol by decimating the neo-Nazis. Mariupol became a symbol of war ruins, complete devastation. Now, if Gaza City were to be completely devastated, then Israel will have a major PR problem internationally. So Israel's self-defense war, while justifiable, does raise some difficult issues for Israel, including what should be the end game for Israel. After all, it's easy to launch a war. It's more difficult to define the end results you want. Do you want to reoccupy Gaza? Do you want to run Gaza? As the Israeli Prime Minister seems to indicate, if that were to be the military objective, then of course we're looking at a pretty drawn-out conflict. In fact, the longer this conflict lasts, the greater the likelihood of a wider war.
Right.
That is not in Israel's interest. That is not in America's interest. It's also not in India's interest that this conflict widen beyond Gaza.
True. I think those are wise words, and I think we've heard two perspectives here. Israel should go back to the drawing board and perhaps work out its objectives and aims, and perhaps also look at where, or probably game it on a board. I don't know what they do in military schools, etc., strategic analysis institutes, but they should really look at where we could be in the next 2 months, 3 months, etc. Getting into a war is easy, as Mr. Chileni said. Defining the objectives and getting out can be more difficult. We leave it at that, viewers. The Right Stand coming up with Anand Narasimhan.